Well, that's interesting. Oh, I know why that didn't happen.
Okay.
Good morning. For those of you who tuned in right on time, you got me to go, what's going on? I couldn't find the intro. I couldn't understand why the intro wasn't playing. It was because I hadn't clicked on it. Anyways, welcome to the Sales Pro Network. I'm Jeff Goldberg, your host. I formed the Sales Pro Network a few years ago to elevate the profession of sales. I am a sales coach and trainer, and I work with both individuals and organizations internationally to help them achieve measurable and sustainable sales increases. And I formed the Sales Pro Network to not only elevate the profession of sales, but for it to be a place where salespeople can come and hang out, network with each other, get great advice from fantastic people. And if you've been with us before, you know every Friday at 10 a.m., other than the last 2 Fridays, I do a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And today is no exception, my friends. Before I introduce our guest, if you're watching us live, please say hello in the comments. If you're watching us live on Facebook and have not connected your account to StreamYard, it won't give us your name. So if you do say hello, please put your name in there too. If you have any questions for our guest today, please put those in the comments and I'll pass them along as we're speaking. And finally, if you're watching us on the replay, please put that in the comments too. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. Henna Pryor, I'm going to read this because it's so impressive. She's a workplace performance expert. She's given 2 TEDx talks. She's a Global Plus keynote speaker and an executive coach for high achievers. She uses a modern science-based approach to being braver in the work that we do. And she's just about to publish her first book, which is called Good Awkward. Her clients call her their secret weapon for impossible change, an honor that she wears proudly. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Henna Pryor. Good morning, Henna.
Good morning. Nothing's more awkward than people reading your bio in front of you to you, and you don't know what you're supposed to do with your face while that's all going on, but great to see you.
It's great to see you too. And whenever I take a stage, normally I'll start out with, hey, it's really great to hear such wonderful things said about me, especially since I wrote them. It's really cool.
Yeah, since I'm pretending like nobody else was in charge of that.
Exactly right. Oh, such nice things you've said about me. Good morning, Bruce Caserman. Good to see you with us. And also good morning, Michael North. Oh, and he says, big fan here.
Michael North is a wonderful human, Michael North.
He's absolutely spectacular. So before we get going, would you maybe give us the 2 or 3 minute version of your background, what brought you up to this point?
Sure. Okay, so 2 or 3 minute version. You're challenging me. I'm a chatterbox, so I'm going to keep this concise. 2 or 3 minute version is I'm a daughter of immigrant parents. My mom was born in India. My mom was born in Pakistan. My dad was born in India, first generation here. I share that as intro because it drives a lot of the context of the origin story. The had something to prove, hyperachievement focused. First job out of college was actually in public accounting. I worked for Ernst & Young for several years, made my immigrant parents very happy to work for a Big 4 public accounting firm, realized in a couple of short years that wasn't for me, and moved to staffing, where I ran a full desk. So I was 100% commissions, pure sales, both from the candidate side and the client side. And I did not have one big account. I hunted what I killed. Every month started at 0. Every week started at 0. So really the true type of sales job, working with several different products, all of which were human in some way or another. That was 14 years. And then 3 and change years ago, I pivoted to entrepreneurship. I actually started my consultancy doing purely executive coaching, but that quickly started to morph because I realized that my approach to sales training, workshops, speaking was unique and different. And what made me successful for 14 years was not the same stuff that our sales trainers had been teaching us for many years leading up to that point. And I had a perspective that was unique. So part of what I do now is similar to you, sales training, sales teaching, but also a lot of keynote speaking for organizations ranging from startups to Fortune 500.
Wow, you did that, I think, in 60 seconds. That was fantastic.
Maybe. I figured I'd rather go short than overly long. So
well done. And by the way, I have ultimate respect for anybody who was a recruiter. I was a recruiter for a year and then owned my own recruiting firm for 4 years. And I consider it maybe the most difficult job in sales because you have to make 2 sales every time. You have to sell the candidate on the job and the job on the candidate. Very, very challenging. Oh my goodness. Joanne Lamarca Matheson says, love this. Hey, Schmo. So I have to start by saying, I know you went to the University of Virginia. My
Mhm.
oldest daughter graduated from there 2 weeks ago. I could not be prouder. Wahoo
Mhm.
wah. Uh,
Yeah.
how did your experience at UVA affect you and your success, if it did at all?
Yeah. So, point of clarification, I actually went to Delaware for undergrad. I went to Virginia for grad. So, it was a little bit of both. But how did my experience affect me and my success? So, actually, interesting story about my UVA experience. I did not have a traditional UVA experience. So, Ernst and Young put me into a program at UVA that was an accelerated program to get a master's degree. So, how it affected my success was, interestingly, when I graduated from Delaware, I went right from undergrad to my very first summer after undergrad was at UVA. I went right from Newark, Delaware to Charlottesville, Virginia, and did an intensive 3 months with UVA as part of my master's. I then worked remotely and did UVA kind of classes for 9 months, then went back to UVA for a 3 month intensive. So, as far as how that impacted my success, there was a period of time, especially that second summer, where I was employed full time and a full time student. I had classes from really 9 to 5 every single day. It was a highly accelerated program. And so, I think nothing prepares you for eventual success than drinking from the fire hose. If you can handle drinking from the fire hose, if you can balance a lot of competing commitments and stay afloat, forget about doing it well, just stay afloat. I think you're pretty prepared to handle anything that comes your way. And so that unique experience, I think, gave me a lot of, resilience and gumption with how much I could handle at any given time.
Love it. And for those of you who have not had the privilege of being on, they don't call it campus, on grounds at UVA, just
Mhm.
imagine any movie where you've seen a stunning campus for a school.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's beyond belief. It's just
Yeah.
amazing. And my daughter was very fortunate to be able to get in there. You cannot be a dummy and go to UVA.
No, no.
It's quite a competitive school. So you mentioned you were a recruiter, and so was I, and a highly successful one at that. But you say, I loved the industry, but it broke my heart every time I help a high performing employee exit their high potential team. Why did it break your heart when you made a placement?
Mm. So it didn't break my heart when I made every placement. Some placements, it was better for the candidate, it was better for the client, and I felt really good about that. But too often, I would see a candidate leave a team in which they could have been really successful. And, in a way, I was helping them do it, right? I was earning the fee to help them do that. But I saw that there were problems that could have been solved on their existing team, right? A leader that could have helped them develop in a different way or could have given them a trajectory that would have really capitalized on their gifts. And so to me, it felt like missed opportunity, right? Rather than fixing the problems that exist, they're running from them and going to another company. And I was helping them do it. And so, while again, I was grateful that there were enough people that wanted to do that, that it fed a very generous income, at the same time, it to me felt like I was repeatedly putting a band aid on a gaping wound and no one was actually addressing the wound. Why was there turnover at these companies? Why were these candidates so dissatisfied by where they were working, what they were doing? And so, really, for me, it's, I think the industry is still magical. I love it dearly. I'll never regret any of those 14 years. But I also think, as staffing partners or as executive coaches, there's a little bit of responsibility that we at least educate the clients that are losing people, en masse, as to why those things are occurring, because it's better for all of us if we can address those things at the root.
Except for a recruiter who makes their money
Except
by
for
taking
right.
people from one place to another.
Well, and here's the counterintuitive truth to that. I actually don't think that's true. I think the more consultative I was with my clients, and if I occasionally could give them reasons to keep people instead of losing them, I'll tell you what, I earn more business from them long term. So it's okay to actually address the gaping wound and not stick on the band-aid if you're playing the long game. If you're just trying to collect the fee quickly, sure, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. But if you're playing the long game, trying to build a relationship with a client who's going to trust you and only you for years to come, it's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And it sounds like you believe in an acronym that I've taught my children from a very young age, ADTRT, which stands for always do the right thing. Yep.
Yeah, I wish I could say I always did the right thing. I would say somewhere later into my career, I started to have a different level of what game do I want to play, right? My focus changed a little bit.
Got it. You say that you do not accept excuses and believe that the very qualities that lead high achievers to success are precisely what holds them back from even greater levels of accomplishment and fulfillment. What? The qualities that bring us success also hold us back? Can you explain a little bit further on that one?
Yeah, it's the quintessential paradox of the high achiever. We became successful because of X, and so we keep doing more of X, and then we get to a certain point in our career and we're thinking, gosh, I'm still doing more of X. In fact, I'm doing it even better. Why does this feel so dissatisfying? Or why am I looking around going, I'm not really into this right now, right? And so I'll just share a specific example. I personally am just a hyper doer. I'm always doing. I'm always putting 100% into everything that I do. And I remember in my later years when I was in kind of a mentorship managerial role in staffing, I was less of I was awarded less for being a doer and looked at as more of a strategic guider of the newer population of recruiters that was coming in. But it was still really hard for me to get out of the doing, right? So somebody would come to me and say, Henna, I don't know what to do about this deal. Can you help me? And here I am in the trenches with them completely, which is helpful sometimes. But then, of course, you do that every day, all day, and you're like, I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm drowning because I'm not only doing my job, I'm doing everyone else's job too. So there comes a point where the things that made you wildly successful when they are in excess or when they are a later career, when things have changed, they not only don't feel good anymore, but they stop making you successful. They actually are preventing you from reaching whatever that next level is. And so I think, prevailing wisdom a lot amongst a lot of coaches and speakers is that first level of success, you say yes to everything. And I believe that you say yes to everything, say yes to the grunt work, say yes to the hard stuff. That's how you learn. That's how you sharpen your sword. But as you start to ascend into something that feels a little different, the harder muscle to flex is potentially saying no to things that you used to do with reckless abandon, or revisiting, is this important to me now? And so I see that play out over and over as people get more and more successful. And it's the hardest untraining that they have to do.
Yeah, and I think for anybody in management, it's a challenge to help people learn and grow rather than just do it. I know I spent 14 of my almost 50 years in sales management, national sales director, and things like that. And I can't tell you how many times I'd be observing a salesperson, maybe on the phone, and just want to rip the phone out of their hands and say, "This
Right.
is how you do it," and close the
Right.
deal for them. Except you might close the deal, but they're not learning anything, and you've got to learn to kind of give it up sometimes so that people can grow.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned this, because to me, this is one of the toughest things with modern sales teams with generational differences is, the leader, the tenured leader who had so much success is trying to tell this millennial Gen Z person, no, you got to do it this way. They do things differently. We are talking about two different approaches to life. Forget about just business, two different approaches to life, and nothing will turn off a more junior or millennial Gen Z salesperson, no matter how motivated they are. Nothing will turn them off faster than feeling that disconnect of, do you not trust that there's a different way to do this? Right? There has to be a different way to do this. And are we as leaders creating the space for that?
Fabulous. I promise you, I want to talk about awkwardness in your book, but I also saw in your bio that you
Yeah.
relentlessly quote Ted Lasso, who just finished up the finale the other day, which I thought was terrific.
Yeah.
What are a couple of your favorite Ted Lasso quotes?
Oh, a couple of my favorites. Okay. So my number one favorite is, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you feel comfortable doing it, you're probably not doing it right. Right? Or something like that. And then the other actually was this season, there was a great quote. It actually didn't come from Ted, it came from Higgins. He said something when Ted was freaking out about something. He said, you should be sure that you find out before you flip out. And I just love that. Too often we flip out about, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, to be clear. We flip out about what might be happening or what could happen. We what if, find out first before you flip out. I think it was sage advice. I love it.
A stunningly wonderful show. And may I just
Yeah.
say, Roy effing Kent, I love it.
Yeah, always.
Your LinkedIn banner quotes you as saying, awkwardness isn't a weakness to fix, it's your greatest asset for personal growth. So I saw that, I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah.
And your upcoming book is on that topic. Why
Yep.
did you write a book about awkwardness? How do you define awkwardness?
Yep.
How is it an asset? And what does it have to do with improving sales performance?
I love it. 20 questions in one. Okay. So we'll start with, how is this true, right? How is it an asset instead of a weakness to fix? So I think most people hear the word awkward and they hear deficiency, discomfort, something that is not good, right? I don't want to be awkward. I don't want to feel awkward. This is not a good thing. And as a daughter of immigrants, I mentioned at the top, I'm first generation in the United States. And I will say my origin story is littered with awkwardness. I never dressed the same as anyone. I didn't eat the same food. Everyone else had their peanut butter and jelly on a white bread sandwich. My lunchbox smelled of, keema paratha and like spicy stuff that was wafting through the cafeteria. Never felt quite like I was in that circle of cool kids, never quite got there. And then as I continued into high school, started to find my way, started to figure out who I was. But it wasn't until college that I found other people that kind of didn't do things the way everybody else did. And all of a sudden, the things that before made me feel awkward or made me feel that I was awkward felt so normal and so natural. And then, we kind of came into the pandemic, and I remember Brene Brown, anybody who's into professional development, worships at the altar of Brene like I do.
Exactly.
And she had a phrase that she used very often, and in her podcast and in interviews, she would say, stay awkward, brave, and kind. Stay awkward, brave, and kind. And I would hear that and I'd go, I know how to be brave and I know how to be kind. I don't know how to stay awkward. It doesn't feel good, right? What do you mean stay awkward? Staying awkward sucks. Why would we want to do that? And so I started to deep dive into it. I started to research it. And what I found was just such an interesting and fresh perspective on an emotion that is 100% universal. The most confident salespeople you've ever met are not immune to awkwardness. They don't get to eliminate awkwardness. They've learned how to embrace and befriend and manage awkwardness. And any transitional point, any new situation, any risk that you take invites awkwardness. There's no chance of getting around it if you are trying to grow professionally or grow personally. So I wanted to explore the role of that unique, specific emotion in this professional development, personal development journey. And I found out some really interesting stuff. So I'll just quickly say that the definition that I operate by is awkwardness is what you feel when there's a gap between your two selves. So there's the self that you believe yourself to be, your true self. And all of a sudden, that person is at odds with the person that they see on display. For a moment, for a few minutes, there's a gap between these two people. So I'm walking down the street, I trip over the sidewalk. All of a sudden, Henna, who knows how to walk in a straight line, is at odds with that person doesn't know how to, pay attention when they walk. Who's on display is different. I speak up in a meeting, I try something, and it falls on, deaf ears, silence, awkward. People are like, no, that wasn't any good. The person I believe myself to be, smart, capable, expert, adds value, all of a sudden feels at odds with the person who's on display. They think I'm an idiot, right? They think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And so when we talk about awkwardness as an asset, it's learning specifically, A, how to address those two selves, and B, empowering yourself with the tools to live in that gap. And people who can live and survive and thrive in that gap, they kill it. They kill it, but we don't give it enough attention.
So what does that have to do with improving sales performance?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, sales is the most awkward role there is. I think every time we open our mouths in the sales conversation, we are inviting the possibility of getting it wrong, right? We invite the possibility of, I thought I understood their business, and they correct you and they're like, nope, that's not it at all. Awkward, right? You attempt to say, hey, this is how my product, service, solution solves your problem. And they're like, that's not even a problem that we're facing. Awkward, right? Every time we try something in sales, there is a very strong possibility that we miss the mark. It's going to happen. There's no getting around that. Now, what happens is, especially with professionals who have not been in the industry a long time, is you have one or two of those experiences. Awkwardness, as much as I preach about embracing it, part of the embracing it is an uncomfortable emotion. It doesn't feel good to feel awkward. It brings discomfort. And what happens oftentimes that can really shoot salespeople in the feet is that if they continue to put themselves out there and then are faced with this awkwardness and don't have a strategy to deal with it, then it turns into avoidance. It turns into, I don't want to feel that way again. So instead of trying that creative approach, or instead of saying that thing that's a little bit, avant-garde or a little bit different than what my competitors say, I'm just going to play it safe. I'm not going to say anything different, or I'm not going to say it at all. Right. And all those risks that we have to take as salespeople in order to stand out and be different, we avoid them, which is literally, a complete doorstop to any of the organic growth or the double-digit growth that most of us want to see in sales.
Right. It's so interesting to listen to you say that, because as you were speaking, I had a moment of revelation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sales trainer and coach by day and a stand-up comedian at night.
I heard.
Some of my funniest moments have been when I blow a line on stage and acknowledge it. And by the way, when you blow a line, it's awkward as hell because there's that
Yeah.
moment where you were expecting a laugh and everybody's staring at you. In fact, I was honored to be invited to do stand up at UVA at my daughter's
Oh,
graduation,
that's awesome.
not at the
Yeah.
graduation itself in front of
Yeah.
thousands of people, but I had about 75 people there. And about halfway through, I was looking out at the audience and kind of got lost in the audience, and I forgot my next joke. And I actually had a little index card in my pocket. I just pulled it out. I said, "Let me see what other stupid shit I wanted to talk to you about tonight." And the
Yeah.
audience cracked up. It was the
Right.
acknowledgement of it's okay to be awkward actually created a closer bond with the audience.
I love that story. And it demonstrates, one of the tenets in the book is right now, authenticity is a buzzword, such a buzzword. Everybody talks about authenticity as an advantage in sales, an advantage in life. And what's funny is what I've observed in my executive coaching work is people are like, okay, I need to be more authentic. I want to be more authentic. And then they layer on this little bit of shame and guilt because they don't know how to be their authentic selves. They're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be like that, but who is that person? And how come I can't seem to access that version of it for me? And what I think of awkwardness as is one of the obstacles to authenticity, right? We try to be our fully formed selves, but sometimes we try to be that person and it doesn't land the way we expect it to. It has to do with expectations. It feels awkward. It feels unexpected. It feels embarrassing. It feels cringy. So unless we can prepare for that and condition for that, authenticity will always feel a little bit over here or for someone else because there are barriers to authentic, wholeheartedness. And we have to address those barriers in order to get there. So I love, that's your authentic self was able to come out because you embraced what could have been an awkward moment and took it in that direction. I love that story.
Thank you. And it's a real challenge because I'm what I call a looking good machine. And I'm not talking about physically. It's like, I hate being wrong. I hate looking
Yeah.
stupid. And there's that moment of, oh shit, they think I'm an idiot. I'm failing. And when you just embrace it and be authentic, or as Good Morning Yusuf Tarapov says, vulnerability. I love that phrase.
Mhm.
The audience or whoever you're speaking to actually reacts because you got to be human.
Yeah. And just to Yusuf's point, one of the chapters in the book, I talk about, what is the relationship between awkwardness and vulnerability, because they are tied in many ways. I think the distinction I would make in case it's useful to Yusuf or others is that vulnerability can be a little higher on the scale of emotional exposure, right? It's a little bit more of, hey, this is hard for me, or hey, this is really tough, or hey, this is, the emotion I'm feeling. Awkwardness can have similar characteristics in many ways, but is a little lower on the scale of emotional exposure. And so what I often notice again is leaders know, sales leaders especially know that vulnerability is something that is important in this modern workplace. People are looking for it, people are expecting it. But what I see is this, unfortunate raise in faux vulnerability. So in the book, I have a whole chapter on faux vulnerability and how these leaders are either doing vulnerability beautifully and it's real and we can feel it. And we're like, gosh, I really love this leader for just being this way. And then there are the people who are like, I'm supposed to be vulnerable. So let me just tell the team how hard this feels for me, but we can all sniff it out, right? We're like, it clearly doesn't feel that hard for you, or you really don't feel the pain that we're feeling around this right now. That faux vulnerability is really dangerous. And so I say awkwardness is a stepping stone. If you can't stay in that stumbly, fumbly, imperfect middle first, if you're still keeping that air of I'm perfect and everything is easy for me and I don't have missteps, if you think your missteps make you look not as professional or expert to your teams, huge missed opportunity, because in fact, your lack of perfection puts your team members at ease. It lets them be more creative. It lets them be more innovative. And if you can't do that, vulnerability is still on the shelf. You can't get there yet.
Yeah. And once again, that it's really, at least for me, counterintuitive because
Yeah.
being brought up in the, I'm old as dirt, and being brought up as I was, a leader, you're perfect. You have all the answers. You're there to
Yeah.
lead the team, show them the right way. And when you make mistakes or are vulnerable, that's a sign of weakness almost.
Yeah.
Now, that's
Yeah.
not who I am as a person, but as a leader, when I was leading sales teams, it was always the challenge. How do I be honest and vulnerable while still earning and keeping their respect?
Yeah. And that is, to your exact point, it is a shift for modern leaders. It was not that way. I mean, I'm in my 40s. I think people think I'm younger than I am. It's not how it used to be. It was not that way. There was a different expectation. The expectations of, people on your team that are millennial, Gen Z, even I would say, me, I'm kind of the Gen X millennial crossover. We expect, and I would go so far, I'm going to be a little controversial, we demand that our leaders show us a bit more of that fully formed self. Otherwise, it feels like there's a wall. We're not interested in that. That is not our priority in feeling like we're being nurtured and developed. And so this is a muscle to build. It is a mental muscle that modern leaders have to build that might be new for quite a few people.
Yeah. And being 68, I grew up in the era where it's, I'm the boss, go do it.
Right.
Here's the way it's going to get done.
Right.
Leave me alone. And that, as I manage teams now, it's a real shift to be able to get past that. I'm the boss and listen to me, to be actually a leader that listens to them and is able to say, you know what, I made a mistake, or to be vulnerable. I believe this is a quote from you. The fact that I cannot escape into 1,000 bats to escape awkward social situations is a constant source of irritation. Why bats? And what are some of the awkward things that have happened to you in your career?
Oh God, no. So first of all, I wish I could take credit for that quote. It's some meme that's been floating around the internet. So it is not mine.
I saw it and I loved it.
Yeah, kind of like, vampire, just poof, like get me out of this. Awkward situations. My God, this is part of where this book was born from. I don't think I'll ever be immune from awkward situations. I am the quintessential, I feel like I constantly put my foot in my mouth. I feel like I constantly do the wrong thing. So one of the stories I tell early in the book is when the pandemic started to, it's not over, but when things started to lift and we started to convene in person again, I remember one of my very first client meetings. I had a meeting with a very senior leader, and I was actually a sales leader, very senior leader, about doing a training with his team. And so we met in person. I, gave him 15 minutes of my finest sales pitching, right? I'm like, all right, I know what to do. I know how this would be good for his team. And I'm thinking I'm crushing it, right? And he puts his hand up and I'm like, I nailed it, right? And I go give him a boisterous high five. And then the next thing he says is, Henna, I was putting my hand up because I was telling you to stop. And I was like, oh my God, she forgot how to human. Like, seriously, and this is where what's important to understand about awkwardness in general is this is not just something for introverts. This is not just something for, the socially shy or people who deem themselves socially awkward. I am a quintessential extrovert. People don't scare me, but in the pandemic, something happened, and the research supports this, where our social muscles atrophied a bit. We got out of practice. We didn't have these day-to-day interactions like we were doing before. And we kind of got out of practice with people's cues and their physicality and their facial expressions. So even the most extroverted among us found ourselves for the first time potentially in our lives in these positions that felt socially unsteady. And so again, this exploration of awkwardness isn't just for people who identify as introverted or socially awkward. It is for everyone. Everyone's got their versions of it that they can speak to.
Yeah, I'm extroverted and socially awkward.
I don't think you seem socially awkward, but it is funny, the choice of words. One of the explorations is it can be a state or a trait. I feel awkward right now, and then there's people who are like, I'm awkward, right? I'm socially awkward, and that choice of language is always interesting, and it's part of the exploration too.
Yeah, I think at least part of my social awkwardness comes from a deep desire to not chit chat about stupid stuff. I can talk about how was your day for about 10 seconds before I want to kill myself. You want to talk about deep stuff, I want to have that conversation. But people think because of what I do for a living and what I do at night, and that oh, you must be a great chitter chatter. No, I'm the guy standing in the corner at the party, hoping that there's a dog there so I can play with the dog and having a cocktail and get out as quickly as I can.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that? There's actually one of the pieces of research I found for the book was that getting to deep conversation quickly is actually an antidote to awkwardness. People think it's the other way. They think you ask a deep, meaningful question that's going to create more awkwardness. Research proves it's actually the other way around. The deeper the question, the more you build connection, and the awkwardness dissipates faster.
Lucky for me.
Yeah, lucky for you.
What's one of the biggest mistakes that you find sellers are making today in the modern workplace?
I have many, but I'm going to say one of my passion points, which is not directly related to awkwardness, but I think I have to mention it, is I'm very passionate about messaging, sales messaging. Michael North has, been part of some of my programs. I think one of the biggest mistakes that modern sellers make is they have not made adjustments for the way the market now communicates. So I see too many people who in conversation like this are very much one way. And then you read their emails and their LinkedIn messages and you're like, who's this? Who's this person? This does not sound like that person. This is a totally different person. This robotic, stiff version of Henna Pryor, robotic, stiff version of Jeff Goldberg. And so people have not learned or been trained on sales copywriting in certain industries. And again, it's very evident to me, certain industries, they prioritize it, others they don't. My former industry was staffing. They did not prioritize it. They definitely hung on very hard to phone, in-person meetings only. And then when COVID hit, everyone was like, huh? How do we write a good email? How do we write a good text message? How do we write a good LinkedIn message? And they were struggling. And so finally, I couldn't help it. I took it upon myself to create something for that industry because there was such a gap there. But to me, one of the biggest mistakes that sellers make is not learning the skills, the patterns, the blueprints of sales writing. It is a different style of writing than ninth grade English class. Those are two different things. And if you've never been trained in it, you're still operating by how you learned it in school, which is not what people are looking to read to make emotional connection in sales. So that to me is one of the biggest.
I love that because when I'm talking to salespeople about that exact subject, I find that people write the way they write, but I tell them write the way you speak.
Yes,
Be a human.
I say that too.
And LinkedIn posts too. It's like I have a dear friend. I don't know if you know Joe Apfelbaum. He's very big on LinkedIn. He's brilliant. He's a genius, actually. And I don't toss that word around lightly. He's posting multiple times a day. He teaches people LinkedIn as well as AI. He's got a brand new AI program, which is fabulous. But he's just him. The Joe that comes over to my house and hangs out is the same Joe that you see on LinkedIn. And I don't know about anybody else, but I just relate to it immediately because he is being that authentic self that we were talking about. It's just Joe putting it out there. It's almost, you like me, great. You don't like me? Okay, that's okay too. I'm just going to be me.
I love
is that what you're talking about in sales?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's funny what you just said about the you like me, you don't like me. One of my favorite little snippets, and I wish I could credit it. I don't remember where I first heard it, but love me, hate me, there's no money in the middle. Love me, hate me, there's no money in the middle. You can love me, you can hate me, but that forgettable, safe, generic middle section, you're forgettable. No one will remember you. But love me, hate me, there's no money in the middle. And one of the best compliments I've ever received is, Henna, you are the same person everywhere, right? With your college friends, at work, on LinkedIn, in your book, right? My beta readers are like, oh my God, this is so your voice, right? I love that it's still in your voice. That is a sword to sharpen. Again, it's not necessarily natural. I put intentionality behind making sure there's congruence and cohesion between all the different places in which I show up, because digital communication is now a primary mode of communication. You owe it to people to find a voice that matches in all of those places. And that does take some work, and people just need to prioritize it.
Absolutely. And somebody, I don't know who this is, but they says they love your copywriting program. Whoever you are, I'm sure Henna thanks you.
Thank you.
That thing about, not being in the middle brings to mind, years ago, I used to go to Fire Island, which is just a great place to hang out and meet people and have fun. And there was a girl I was very interested in. I was talking with her and a couple of other people. And at one point I said, I'm just going to walk away and kind of play it cool. And I came back and the other two were there and she was gone. I said, what happened to Susan? They said, oh, she left with some guy. I said, oh man, I was trying to be cool. And the person said to me, there's no profit in being cool.
I love
and
that.
I've never forgotten that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, when you kind of back to the beginning, where did this interest in awkwardness come from? I realized that cool, flawless confidence, I was never going to find it. I realized early on, I'm someone who snorts when she laughs really hard, right? Like this cool confidence, I was never going to get there. So I was like, okay, I do want to be confident, but I need a different kind of confidence, because that cool confidence is not happening for me. And so, I call it in the book awkward confidence. And I think that just does feel mostly true. I think people would describe me as someone who comes across as confident, but you will see my awkward edges all day, every day. And that's exactly what makes me come across as confident, because I own every single one of them.
Love that. And you suggest that everyone should learn public speaking skills. Why that?
There's actually, it's a great, for a million reasons, but a recent article, which I'm happy to link if you want to share with your folks. There's a CNBC article that came out that Brene Brown and Simon Sinek listed, top 3 leadership skills. And number 1 amongst them was public speaking, because ultimately, I don't want to be dramatic here with the whole robots are coming, right? But there is going to be a premium on human communication skills that can be done in a way that moves people. There are things that the most intelligent of AI are pattern recognizers, right? There's going to be a lot of great things that they can replicate, but what you can never replicate is human to human connection. And what you can never replicate is that on a one-on-one conversation like you and I are having, or in a group of people. And so more and more leadership confidence, leadership trust is coming from the ability to take something that is meaningful, that needs to hit people at a visceral place, and communicate it in a way that is not just heard, but absorbed, high impact, shifts people, moves people. And that is a skill that a lot of people are afraid to build, right? It's number one over death, right? The fears of things to do. There is going to be an increasingly new premium on public speaking in whatever capacity, whether you do it for a living or you do it as a leader just in your teams. And people who aren't willing to prioritize it, I think, are going to find themselves falling behind. It's one of those human skills that cannot be replicated digitally.
Yeah. And who better than Brene Brown and Simon Sinek to make that connection with the audience? They're both phenomenal. And I actually read that in terms of things that people fear, it is public speaking first, death is second, and snakes are third. People would rather get bit by a snake and die rather than get on a stage. It's incredible.
It's true.
Let's see. Yusuf says, by the way, I told you before that my 2 books were written by a ghostwriter who's amazing. Let me introduce you to Yusuf Tarapool.
Oh, awesome.
The greatest ghostwriter in the world. There are places where we add value and places where we have no experience adding value. Confidence there lies in having the courage to be curious and open about what we don't know.
I 100% agree. One of the most awkward, confident things you can do is say, okay, I'll just give you an example. I went to a US book show last week in New York City. I'm publishing my first book. My publisher sent me to this show. It was full of literary people, agents, publishing houses. Someone asked me a question about my galley in the hub, something. And I looked, this was the president of Blackstone Publishing, by the way, like very high profile guy. He asked me something. I looked him square in the eye and I was like, this is a bit embarrassing. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a first-time author. I don't even know what those words are. Can you help me out? But I was authentic. I was open. I was curious. We had a great conversation. I don't think I left, any bad taste in his mouth about, wow, she's a rookie. She doesn't know what she's talking about, but that's it. That's that awkward confidence. It's the willingness to not sit there and go, oh, this is embarrassing. I don't know things. It's the willingness to own the embarrassing, embrace the embarrassing and say, hey, all right, well, here it is. I have no idea what half of those words are. What are we going to do with it? We bonded. We had a great conversation, and it's just more and more of building that muscle.
I love that. And I can't tell you how many times I've given salespeople this bit of advice. If you don't know the answer to a question that a prospect's asked you, do not BS them.
No,
Simply say, I'm sorry, I don't know what the answer to that, but I know where to get the answer and I'll get back to you. Salespeople, for some reason, many times seem to think that they have to have all the answers immediately. They have to know everything, but except we're humans too. And, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me find out.
I love it.
One of your techniques, by the way, before speaking before very large audiences is to squeal loudly to get the jitters out. Can we hear a squeal?
Oh my God. It's just like some high pitch. I just have to, I'm an energetic person. You can tell,
really?
And when I, now I don't get as nervous because I've been keynote speaking for a while, but I do still get, I'll call it nervous excitement, right? It's not nerves in the fearful sense anymore, but especially the bigger the audience, the more I'm kind of like, ooh, physical energy release is such a good way to reground. I think there's so many little techniques that people can use for things like that.
Yep, absolutely. You recently posted that we should take our work seriously, but never ourselves. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I think it ties very much to the awkwardness conversation. And the example I just gave at the US book show is one example of that. I'm overachiever, but that is, if I were to describe myself, professionally, I am extremely hardworking. I confession time. I really want to be liked. And I do that a lot through trying to put out a lot of work, like good work. I probably grind a little too hard on certain days to try to be the best so that people like what I do, right? I don't want to face the wrath of she doesn't know what she's talking about, or I don't want to feel those things. That's just an honest truth. That said, I had to, many years ago, make the distinction between taking my work seriously and then understanding that no matter how hard I tried, not everyone will like me. Not everyone will like my work. Not everyone will resonate with my approach. And so I have to be willing to take my own physical, kind of presence, my own visibility digitally with a grain of salt and just take it all with a little bit of a laugh. Part of anchoring into speaking, into any sort of, I kind of chuckle at the word like thought leadership. When you want to kind of move into that realm, you are going to invite some people who just either don't like what you have to say. You're going to invite plenty of people. It's funny. I tried not to read the comments on the TEDx's, but every now and then I look at one and I'm like, it's clear as day. The person didn't watch the talk. They read the title, but they didn't actually watch the talk because their comment speaks to what the talk answers, and they didn't actually get there. So you just have to recognize that if you take yourself too seriously, you will always stop yourself, right? The fear of awkwardness, the fear of what people will say, their approval will stop you. You'll go into avoidance. You won't take the chances. Take your work seriously, but don't attach all of it to yourself. If you do, it's a death trap. You're not going to be able to get out of your own way.
Yeah, and it's a challenging tightrope to walk because, like
Mhm.
you, I don't just want to be liked. I want to be loved by everybody. I want to, oh
Sure.
my God, Jeff's the greatest. And the other side of me says, F them if they can't take a joke.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to love me. I know that
Right.
to be true. And I guess as long as I have the love of my kids and my dog, I'm okay. And speaking of that, you just talked about, you're a hard charger and overachiever, but I also know you have 2 kids and a husband that you love. How do you balance the getting everything done and being with the family?
How do I continue to okay, so let me answer this the most awkward and honest way I can. I stink at it some days and I'm great at it other days. I mean, that's the true answer. I think the way I'll answer it is I long ago abandoned any hope of the traditional work-life balance. That word felt like it was punitive. The word balance, every time I felt like I couldn't achieve it, I would add shame, guilt, frustration on top. And I realized with the amount of things I want to accomplish in my life, both professionally and personally, and personally, I want to see the world. I want to travel. I want to do all these things. Balance is an impossibility. So I finally started replacing that with work-life harmony. And that framing has been very helpful in creating some systems in my life that work. I think of every day as a dance. Yesterday, I felt like I was really present with my kids. We spent time outside. We really, were connected. My phone was in the other room. Other days, I'm at my computer till 9 o'clock at night because I've got something I need to get out the door. I feel like I barely looked at my kids or husband, right? It is not an art that I will ever perfect, nor do I expect to. But I think if I keep using the term harmony, then I give grace to the fact that it is a dance, right? I'm just going to constantly be doing the dance. And that's what I need to focus on.
Brilliant. And that's right in line with a gentleman who I greatly respect and follow, James Arthur Ray, who is a thought leader in the personal development space. And he says balance is bullshit. It's all
Yeah.
about harmony. It's exactly
Yeah.
what he says. And something else you said just struck me too, because that balancing between getting all the work done and being with the family. When I first got divorced, it was a huge life change for me and certainly my children. And when they would come over every other weekend, I still had work to do because now I'm supporting
Sure.
2 households and it's a whole new world and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
On a Saturday or Sunday when I really wanted to be with them, I would often be sitting here at my desk and typing and doing something. And it really taught me a lesson about something that I teach to salespeople, which active listening, that, salespeople are horrible at that. They're just
Yeah.
horrendous listeners. And one of my kids would come in while, I'd stick something on the TV for them and I'd be working here. And one of them would come in and, Daddy, I'd keep typing. And, yes, dear, what can I do for you? And, it didn't take very long before I figured out that doesn't feel good to them. Forget about the fact that I can't really hear what they're saying when I'm trying to read an email or write something, but it doesn't feel good to the other person. And when I would actually stop and turn around and look them in the eye and be with them, that's worth everything. And it's worth a few minutes to take away from that productivity. And I'm not sure that you can balance it, but maybe there's a way to get harmony out of that.
Yeah, I think quality over quantity always. And I'll just share with you, I saw an Instagram post that I shared to my story a couple weeks ago, but it really, it hit me at a visceral level. It said something like, and I'm paraphrasing because I won't have it exactly right. When someone is telling you a story and you are on your phone, it is a form of rejection. And I read that and I was like, oh, even if your phone is in your hand while someone is telling you a story and your fingers are on the screen, it is a form of rejection. And I think when I read it that way, it hit me, right? Like my kids are telling me something and I'm listening. No, it is a form of rejection. And over time, that rejection accumulates and turns into disconnect. And that is on me, right? That is on me. I am never too busy to put it down for a second and be in their story. So it was a good reminder.
Yep. I think Mr. Simon Sinek has a whole bit on that about, that the phone, I actually did consciously did this reason. I went out on a first date with somebody, first time in a very long time, and I made a conscious decision to leave my phone in the pocket instead of having it on the table.
Yeah.
Because every time, even if I have it silenced, every time it rings, I'm going to see something. And my excuse is always, well, I have 3 kids, and if there's something going on, I need to take it. I just kept it in my pocket, and
Yeah.
guess what? I didn't die. I made it through
Yeah.
an hour and a half of dinner without dying.
I love it.
Let's see. Good morning, Don Levine. Good to see you. Good morning. I hope I pronounced your last name right, Ian Arapit. And he says, question for Anna, what's your biggest struggle when it comes to executive coaching?
When it comes to executive coaching, so I'm assuming the question is intended to be as the coach, right? So what is the struggle that I experience with my clients?
Sounds right to me.
Okay. I'm pretty good at screening for people that I work with. I'm very selective about people that I work with, but I would say, well, twofold. If your company is making you do coaching, I don't much enjoy working with those clients, right? Part of the power of executive coaching is you have to be bought in. You have to decide, I'm looking to improve in XYZ areas, and I'm willing to do the hard work to look inward, probably talk about some stuff that I don't talk about in other spaces, probably acknowledge some things about myself that I don't love, right? In order to get to the other side towards improvement. So if somebody is being made to do it, that's always a big challenge. That's a struggle. I don't enjoy taking on engagements like that, nor do people on my team. The other thing too is, ultimately a lot of what I anchor into in my keynotes and in my training is strategy without action is hallucination. So we can talk strategy all day. We can have insight moments all day. But if you just have those and you don't adjust your behavior, or you don't actually move one foot in front of the other with the next right action step, your insights are nothing. It's just, okay, great. Your brain has a little bit more, matter floating around in there. Nothing changes. And so I think for me, it can be tough when I have a client who consistently comes that wants to make change, who has had the big moments of insight. They know what action they want to do. And for whatever reason, that action keeps getting blocked. And so oftentimes when that happens, not to give myself too much credit as a coach, but what I tend to find is that action is blocked by some deeper rooted trauma that probably needs to be addressed at a clinical or therapeutic level in order for us to move forward. Coaching is very forward focused.
Yeah.
Therapy is a little more past focused. And so when we've made great progress and then there's a point where something just keeps hitting, typically I find there's some sort of historical component that needs deeper addressing in order to then excavate that and get to that next point of the hump. But that can be tough. Even people with ambition can get stuck sometimes.
Yeah. And I don't do executive coaching, but I do sales coaching and sales management coaching. And as I'm thinking of this, it actually says more about me than them. But the thing that I struggle with is, somebody's paying me for my coaching and advice, and then they don't listen to it, or they want to fight me about it. Drives me nuts. And I understand that, people have to go through their own process to get where they want to go. And it's my job to help get them there.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you something, it's like, won't you just listen to me? I have a dear friend who owns a law firm, and he handles divorces. And we used to sit on the beach together and, philosophize. And one of the things he used to love to say to me, and I agree with, is, if my clients would just listen to what I tell them to do and do it, everything would work out fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny right now, this isn't necessarily a struggle of my executive coaching, but I'll tell you, one of the challenges I'm hearing more than anything right now is generational difficulties, right? So executives that are trying to inspire, nurture, lead, develop more junior staff. These, I think, more than every era, every century has this. This is not unique to us, but it feels like there's more potential misalignment right now with the old school and the new school. And what it ultimately boils down to is bridging, we all want the same things, but neither side is seeing clearly, why does this, person want to work from home and do it this way? Why does this person want to do, this kind of old school way of business? And we're passing each other like ships in the night rather than finding the truth. So I feel like a lot of coaching with leaders and with developing professionals, sales and otherwise, is getting shared language again. What are we actually trying to say to each other? And do we actually share the same goal? If we do, we can work through this. If we don't, we got another issue to tackle.
Got it. And Phil Danielle, a great leader in his own right, says we're doing well. So thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
What is PDA Thursday? I saw that on the LinkedIn feed, and I didn't know what that was.
Yeah. Okay. So, little shameless plug, my second TEDx, which has actually kind of gone viral. Apparently, it was the most 10th viewed in the world last month. So
Wow.
I was just found that out yesterday. Yeah, 10th most viewed TEDx talk in the entire world for last month. It's about good bragging. Good bragging, essentially, just by definition, what the question I set out to answer is, in this new hybrid world where we need to share our wins at work in order to be perceived as competent, how do we do that when the world tells us bragging is bad? And one of the antidotes to that is bragging. When we think of bragging, we often think of bad bragging, which is very focused on solo validation. Look at me, look at what I've done. And so you can watch the whole TEDx, it'll explain a lot more. But essentially, the antidote is something called good bragging, which is rather than just focusing on solo validation, please just endorse me for my competence. What we're focused on instead is social celebration. So there's research out of George Mason University that says when you combine your own self-promotion, which is, hey, these are these cool things I did, with other promotion, hey, my TEDx is killing it. It was the 10th most viewed. And by the way, Jeff, your podcast is amazing. You have such great guests. I love listening to you. You have such thought leaders here. When we combine it with this other promotion, they call it dual promotion, it actually has a very different impact. And so PDA Thursday, to answer your question, I just, kind of made it up a couple of weeks ago. Public Displays of Affection Thursday is,
Ah,
how do we give some of that social celebration to the people in our lives that are doing awesome things? And so I just decided, every week or every other week, I'm going to call out someone in my circle that I appreciate, that I think is doing amazing stuff, that probably needs more recognition. And frankly, I'm picking people who I think don't self-promote enough, right? I think there are people who do amazing work, but don't amplify their own voice that much. And so I'm trying to amplify their voices too, because when they do that, I can do that about myself too. And it feels good to everybody. It's a win-win.
it's so funny because when I read PDA, I'm like, I've heard this before. I know what it means. It didn't hit me that it's public
Yeah.
display of affection. And
Public display of affection, appreciation. You can call it whatever you want, but
I love that.
some version of that.
I'm glad I asked it that way because my next question was going to be, what's the difference between good bragging and bad bragging? Why do we do it? So absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
You like to spend evenings with Cody Rigsby on your Peloton. What do you like about Cody in particular?
Cody is free therapy. Anybody who has a Peloton, honestly, why I like Cody? Because working out, I'll tell you, I wish I was naturally athletic. Not to use any limiting belief language, I don't consider myself naturally athletic. I think some people are naturally built certain ways. I am not. I've never been a natural athlete, but I enjoy the mental and physical benefits of exercise, but I need to enjoy it. I tried to be a runner for a while. I still occasionally run in the woods, but running is not my most favorite thing, right? It's just not for me. Listening to a Peloton workout with Cody Rigsby, he's funny. I laugh, and I really enjoy. I'm a laughy person. I seek joy. I look for moments that make me laugh. I create moments that make me laugh. So I do look at other instructors as well, but when I get to work out, break a sweat, and laugh at the same time, it's a much more enjoyable way to spend 20, 30 minutes.
And talk about being your authentic self. Cody is
Yeah.
definitely that.
He is.
He's
Yeah.
unashamedly himself, no doubt.
Unabashedly. Yes. Agreed.
Absolutely. I love Allie Love. I think
Yes,
she's
me too.
fantastic. And Jess King is awesome.
Yeah. All of them.
Hainsby.
Yeah.
They hire them for this. Obviously they're all
Yes.
pretty attractive people, but they all have this
Yeah.
great attitude and you can tell they love what they're doing. It's fantastic. You have a Cavapoo that you didn't really want. Why did you not want your dog and what changed your mind?
Oh gosh, I did not want a dog, any dog. Absolutely not. I didn't grow up with dogs, and my mom was quite afraid of dogs. So I would say it was, to the other, my mom was, her words, attacked by a dog when she was younger, so she really was very skittish around dogs. And so my sister and I, growing up, became skittish around dogs because my mom was so, oh, don't get near that dog, right? Like she instilled that in us. So I did not really have any sort of warm relationship towards dogs. And then, as I got older, I grew out of my fear and I would, pet someone else's dog, but there was no warmth or desire. I don't know. I thought maybe, some people are wired to not want babies. Maybe I'm just wired to not want animals. But my husband grew up with dogs. My daughter really wanted a dog. She was pushing me for years saying, we want a dog. We want a dog. I didn't. I said, it'll be a cold day in hell before, all my best friends from college will tell you, Henna will never get a dog. This was like, this isn't for me. I also love to travel. As a family, we travel. So I'm like, that's not fair to a dog, right? My kids are older now. I don't want to worry about the dog. Long story short, I was getting my hair cut. My hairdresser showed me her 2 dogs. She said, "Oh, these are so easy. Their temperament is so sweet." My daughter at this point had been beating me down. And I said, "Okay, you know what? We'll just go look. We'll just go look." Any
Oh,
dog owner is like, you don't just go look, right? This is Henna's first rookie move. We'll just go look at these puppies. So I held the puppy. And of course, like I've had 2 children. There's a maternal instinct that immediately kicks in where you're like, "Oh, this sweet." So that was it. Game over. I'm like, fine, we'll have this pup. Now, Jeff, can I tell you, if you've ever seen a turnaround on a human being, I am obsessed with my pup. My dog is the best. I love her so much. I don't want to imagine a day that she's not here. I was wrong. I'll just leave it at that. I was wrong. And now it's funny. I love all animals now. Having a dog that has kind of broken their way into my heart like that, I look at every animal completely differently. It is really, humans are interesting the way their minds can change.
Yeah, I consider it personally that the dogs are the greatest thing on the planet Earth.
I agree with you now. I was wrong.
Dog spelled backwards is
God.
yeah, and that's my guy.
Aww.
Who I adore beyond belief. That's Duke, the beach bug.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to pick up your dog and show it.
I was wondering if she was laying. She's got a little donut bed in my office. I didn't know if she was in here or not. Now mine is currently outside, probably. Oh, so cute.
That's Duke, the beach bug, my best buddy.
Here, mine is sitting outside in the driveway, but this is Ruby. She's a little fluff ball, and I love her so much, and she is the best.
Well, my favorite part of the story was, let's just go look at the dogs.
So anybody who has ever adopted a puppy is looking at me like, what do you mean, let's just go look at the dogs? You big dummy. You fell for the trap.
And please, if people are listening, the word that you just used is the perfect one. Please adopt. There's so many dogs that need a home. Really great, healthy dogs. You don't have to have some beat up old dog. And those are great to take on too, but I really advise people to do that. We only have time for one more question. And there was something I saw on your post. What's a leisure trip? Not a leisure trip, a leisure trip.
A leisure trip. So it's actually, that's a new term in my vernacular. So I mentioned that I love to travel. My husband and I did it before kids. Now with our kids are extremely well traveled. I've lost track of how many countries they've visited, but travel is a value for me. I really want to see every corner of the earth. And when I started doing more and more keynote speaking over the last year and a half, I discovered this term bleisure, which is essentially you combine your business trip with a leisure trip. So whether it's you add a day, or in many cases, I don't add a day because I don't want to be away from my children. It's really just carving out and prioritizing. You know, I don't want to be that speaker who goes to a city, throws her stuff in the hotel, gets DoorDash, does her gig, and then comes home. Like, I want to learn something about this city. And I don't want to just go to the, take out fast food. I want to go, is there a really cool restaurant that I could experience? And, the digital world is such that you have a network everywhere. So I'll often throw a Hail Mary out. Hey, does anybody live in this city? Anybody want to meet for dinner? Is it awkward sometimes? Sure. I had a date with, I was in Indianapolis. I had an internet friend, Courtney. I'd never met her. She lived there. She's like, hey, you want to meet for dinner? I said, why not? Right. So we met for dinner. So I'm just trying to combine more business and leisure, and it's paying dividends in many ways.
I love that. And you're speaking to someone who can relate. I can't tell you how many times I've flown into a city, given a talk or a training, and got on a plane and flown right home and missed everything. And I know that you were recently in the town that I grew up in, Chicago. What did you think of deep dish pizza?
Oh my God, I love it. So I've been to Chicago a bunch of times. I'm a super foodie. My favorite deep dish in Chicago is Lou Malnati's. I know that there's people have different thoughts, but I like my Lou Malnati's because of that crust that they have. Amazing. Chicago in general. Name a better food city. There's not. I love Chicago food. My
favorite thing, no kidding, is when a client says, okay, will you come do this in Chicago? I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord.
Yes.
I can go to Lou Malnati's or Pizzeria Uno or Pizzeria Due, which Lou was the chef at those, and he quit and opened up his own place. And this may sound weird, but a Chicago style hot dog is such a treat.
Yes,
it's different than any other hot dog in the world. It's phenomenal. My mom and sister live in Las Vegas, and there's a guy who moved from Chicago to Vegas and opened up a Chicago style hot dog stand there. So when I get to visit my mom and sister, I get to have a hot dog too. Henna, we have run out of time. I could talk to you all day because you're delicious. I'm going to share my screen. Could you please tell people how to reach you in case they're interested, or how to get the book when it comes out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Henna Pryor everywhere. I think I'm basically the only Henna Pryor around these parts. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Henna Pryor. My Instagram is Henna Pryor. Website, hennapryor.com. It'll redirect to Priority Group, but it's just easier to remember that way. And the book, I'm really proud of it. I think in this conversation, hopefully I've illuminated that it's not just another book on get comfortable being uncomfortable. right? Or play in your comfort, outside of your comfort zone. This is a different, fresh take on the conversation. It's goodawkward.com is where you can find more details. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere where you buy books.
Very exciting. Hannah, I had one more question. How often do people call you Hannah, and does that annoy you?
Not as much as they used to. And I think I'm just used to it at this point. And I just correct them. I make it awkward and I correct them.
Mine is always, I don't care what you call me as long as the check's made out to the right name.
There you go. Perfect.
TVs and Goldberg. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance generously. You really are terrific, and I'd be happy to have you back anytime. And gang, as always, let me remind you that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, y'all.